All right. Hi.
Hi.
We're Neurodata Refinement, or NDR, and we are doing science that we want to have be public right from the very beginning. So we're going to be podcasting our journey on this one. It's an exciting journey. We're trying to create restorative neuroscience. To date, there isn't such thing in psychiatry.
Yeah, I've spent the past decade of my work looking at neurofeedback and trying to get people with depression back to healthy brains. And what we've determined is a healthy brain is basically what research has said that an average hundreds of people, this is what a healthy individual looks like. And so I really started getting interested in what about that individual person themselves, and how could we get them back to their healthy state, not this idealized healthy state.
And that means recording people before something happens. So we're thinking of military people before they go off to war. We're thinking of people with seasonal depression or postpartum depression who have times where they're not so depressed and then they get depressed later, or who have times where we know they're before their trauma and we could record them then and then come back later and try and restore them to their original state. We're going to be talking about the cool restorative technologies that we have in subsequent episodes. You should watch them. And you should watch watch our video of when we recorded Kim, when we backed up her brain just a couple of weeks ago. It's online with the podcast. So you know who we are.
I'm Kim Young. I'm an associate professor of psychiatry at the University of Pittsburgh. I've been here for 9 years. And I started out, I'm a Disney princess. Interesting fact about me, my father is a retired Imagineer, worked for Disney for 35 years, and so I was really into acting, but then took a neuroscience elective, fell in love with it, and started chasing down science.
And I'm Greg Siegel. I'm a professor of psychiatry and communication sciences and disorders and translational sciences at the University of Pittsburgh. I have been doing neuroimaging and then trying to translate what we find about what's going on in brains into interventions for the last 25 years or so. I'm also an acrobat, in case that's interesting. So Neurodata Refinement. You may get that the title of this is referencing Severance, the TV show. And the reason we're doing that is because in that show, people actually have information imposed on their brain so they can actually be somebody different than they were a couple of moments ago. And that's actually what we're trying to do here. We record you one day, and then when something bad happens, we can try and bring you back to that original state. So you will be our neurodata refiners, and we can say each week, hi, neurodata refiners. And we are Neurodata Refinement here at Pittsburgh. Today, what we thought we would talk about is our first recording of Kim. Kim's going to have some surgery soon.
Yeah, so I'm having a hysterectomy in 3 weeks, and I know that the recovery is a little intense. And after surgery, a lot of people deal with post-surgical depression and pain levels. And so we thought that I might be a good test case because I probably won't be feeling great after surgery. And so we came in, had me back up my brain and my physiological stuff a couple weeks ago while I was in a healthy, happy, normal state.
So the backup used EEG or electroencephalography. We used a whole bunch of physiological recordings, which we're going to talk about in a few moments. And then we also got some subjective features, both talking about your previous week and thinking about it, yeah?
Yeah. I kept a journal for a couple days the week before and wrote down some of the good things that happened to me, and so that I had something specific to reference and think about while I was backing up my brain. And we also recorded my voice so that later we can see how my pitch, my frequency, how fast I'm talking, all of that good stuff.
Yeah. So we thought today we would talk about what we found when we recorded Kim's physiology, and give you a sense of what we look at here. The first thing we're looking at is Kim's sympathetic nervous system. That is her arousal system. And what we find is that oftentimes people who have a bunch of trauma have very reactive arousal systems, or they get kind of shut down and they dissociate, and you see very little on it. Either way. So we measure this using electrodermal responses, or galvanic skin responses sometimes called, where we put an electrode on each finger. We put a tiny voltage through this finger, and if her fingers are sweating, we're measuring finger sweat, then it conducts and you get a reading on the other finger. If there is no finger sweat, you don't get that transfer of voltage from one finger to the other. So we measured Kim's skin conductance while she rested quietly, and then she read from her journal of happy things, and then she thought quietly about happy things. So this is what we found, and we're going to go over it now. So Kim, what we found is your skin conductance went down, down, down when you were sitting quietly. And that was
good.
You were probably relaxing a bit into it.
Yeah, I always find resting state interesting because you know is what's really going on during rest, and I've tried to really tune into kind of mindfulness and just being present, and so it makes sense that my skin conductance would have gone down during that time.
Right, and then you started to journal, and as soon as you started to journal, your skin conductance went back up. That was a higher arousal state, and when you were thinking about your journal, it remained high. And so I would suggest maybe that you had that sustained high arousal state.
Yeah. I noticed there were two spikes there. That's interesting. I think that the initial one was probably when I first started talking, and I was talking about my cats, which I love and I always use as my happy memories. And then I saw the second spike there, and I think that was when I switched to another topic where I was talking about a party that I went to. It was a goodbye party for someone. I think those are the two events that triggered the increased arousal, and then it did stay up while I was thinking about it silently.
Now, if we start each of those right at where we were, we can see that, or right at the beginning of that portion, we can see the sit quietly was pretty even the whole time, whereas the talk about your journal just went up and up and up, and the sit quietly here went down. But this here, think about your journal quietly, was just stay the course with where you were.
Yeah, and I really think that talking about it was a good way to get me into the memory and get me really kind of immersed in it and feeling it, so that when I was just quietly thinking about it, I still had that emotional response to it. I really do think the talking component was useful for me.
Awesome. So the next thing we looked at was your heart rate. So we measured ECG, or cardiography, with electrodes here, here, and here, 3 electrodes. And we got each of your heartbeats, and that gave us a graph of beats per minute. And we could see the beats per minute in each of the sections. Now, what we're seeing here, is that originally your heartbeat started low. When you talked about your journal, it went a lot faster, and then it came back down. So it started at about 70 beats a minute and was holding kind of steady. You talked about your journal, and we got up to about 76 beats a minute, and then we came back down to about 66 beats a minute.
That's really interesting. And again, I think it really suggests that the talking out loud part is really a critical component for the backing up part.
That's what gets your heart going. Yeah, absolutely. So then we looked at this really cool index where we take all of your heartbeats and we look at the randomness between your heartbeats. And that's heart rate variability. The more fixed it is, usually the more stressed you are. The more randomness there is, that is, you're able to just adjust to things flexibly. It looks at emotional flexibility and emotion regulation. So often depressed people have very low heart rate variability, and it doesn't change very much during the day. People who aren't depressed have a higher level of heart rate variability. So what we saw for you is that heart rate variability actually didn't change that much across all of our conditions. And if anything, when you were sitting quietly thinking about your journal, it went up. But otherwise, it started low and then got higher as you got mindful, and stayed high largely as you talked about your journal, or as you talked about your cats, When you started talking about the party, there it went down. And I do wonder whether maybe your cats are anti-stress.
Yeah, and the party was actually a goodbye party for a friend that's moving out of the country, and so it was bittersweet. It was not purely a positive
Yeah.
experience, and the thought of not seeing them again is a little bit of stress. So that might be what's playing into that.
Yeah, that could very easily be. The next thing we looked at was your breathing or your respiration. And we looked at the peaks of a respiration belt that was around your chest. And this was you breathing in, out, in, out. And we could see that your respiration, let's see if I have well, what I have are the condition means for it. Well, and what's happening is that you are breathing faster initially. And then when you start talking about your cats and the party and you think positively, your respiration rate falls by almost 5 beats a minute.
Wow.
Or 5 breaths per minute. So that was actually a fairly significant decrease.
That's really interesting.
And breathe slower and easier.
Huh.
Which,
something I've never really thought of before.
to me, isn't weird. So the last thing we have for you is your EMG, which is facial electromyography, and we recorded 2 kinds of EMG. We recorded zygomatic, which is your smile muscles, and it's an electrode right here. And again, look on our podcast for the video of when we recorded Kim. And we recorded corrugator EMG, which is your stress response up here with brow furrowing. Now, this zygomatic EMG with your smile muscles went up during sitting quietly. And it held pretty even as you're thinking about your journal. So what I'm thinking here is you sitting quietly is not torturous.
That is accurate. I do enjoy sitting quietly.
And you do it for 2 minutes, and you're getting in the zone, and as you get in the zone, you just might even sit there and smile a bit to yourself and something like that. And so we can actually see that change.
That's really interesting. I would have thought that my face would have become more relaxed, not more smiling, but no, that's an interesting finding.
There's the science. And then your corrugator EMG was really interesting in some sense. We could interpret this as saying that when you're talking about your journal, your brow is furrowed more. Now, what I would like to do is if we see you here and talk for a moment.
Yeah, if I'm just talking, I think my facial muscles are more active in general, and I think that my eyes are very expressive.
Exactly. You have expressive eyes, and I'm going to think about this as an effect of you talking. We don't generally measure a lot of this physiology while people are talking naturally, so I'm just going to say that's probably a speech effect, but we'll see with a few more people.
Yeah, and what did it do during rest? Nothing? Just stayed?
Yeah, it stayed pretty much even there. Not a big change during rest for corrugator. So, this is what we have is a full backup of your physiology. The reason we're looking at physiology is that physiology is connected to the brain. So areas like the amygdala, which are associated with emotional responses, send signals out to the other parts of the brain and body that change things like finger sweat. So if you start getting aroused and you get that subcortical activity, we'll be able to pick it up in your physiology. The other thing that we want to just emphasize is that brains and bodies are integrated. If you're upset, you're going to feel it physically, and it will be physically noticeable. And so we are not ignoring when we think of backing you up and then restoring. What is your physiology doing?
And physiology can be so important to interpreting your emotional state, and as well as the context. If for example, there's a famous study where they administered adrenaline to people in a room, and they either were with a Confederate, a person who worked for the study, who was super excited about the study, or they were in a room with someone who was super mad about the study. And so even though both of they got the same drug, they both got the same physiological arousal, how they interpreted it was really based on context. And so combining both the psychological psychological and the physiological is going to be critical.
I think that's absolutely true. And while we probably won't be giving people adrenaline, which we could do, we have other ways of raising physiology up, which we are going to talk about in our next episodes. So the next time we come in, we will... When is your surgery?
3 weeks from today.
3 weeks. So we will play around with a little bit of the restorative procedures that we have. We're going to be looking at your EEG or electroencephalography results. And then we'll be into post-surgery and seeing what we can do to bring your brain back to what it was today.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see where this goes.
So Neurodata Refiners, tune in next time. We are so happy to be with you for this journey. And please follow us wherever you get your podcasts.